please take a seat. What we're going to do, to keep our focus over this 3 days, as an assessment, we're going to actually have a competition of the Spanish team against the German team and what they've learned. And I don't know how your German and Spanish is, but mine isn't too hot. So
Spanish is much better than my German.
Right. So what we're going to do, the Spanish team looking worried now. But so what we'll do is, after we've explained the room, we're going to have a little game show, and we'll have alternate questions in Spanish and in English for each team, and we'll see how they've got on. But before we do that, and you'll be pleased to know, to make it a little more interesting, of course, we do need a little bit of glamour, so our English presenter is a lady, so we've got a chance to go for that. So now we've come into this room. Do you remember in the last room we had one wall which was symbol, and we were trying to realise that it wasn't so different taking the symbol world if we looked at it logically and then replacing it with the connected home world. So we want to do the same again with the equipment and technology. We want to say, what is it that we already understand? What is the way we view equipment? What is the way we view networks? So if you remember at the very beginning of the week, we wrote ourselves a little list of the sort of things we support. And I'm sure this is not all of them, lads, but it was a good start. And compared to that, oh, here's a good, just to encourage you at this point, we do have our quiz mistress who's just going to come and sit down. Do come in, Martina.
Thank you.
So we had here we had the symbol equipment. So we started, do you remember the first thing we started was over here, and we drew ourselves a list of all the connected home equipment, and we found it was huge, and we found it was diverse. Can anyone remember the sort of diverse stuff that was on that list? What sort of things were on the list? What sort of technologies were on that list that we don't use in Symbol?
All the video stuff.
All the video stuff, loads and loads of video stuff, satellite stuff, modems, and your background, telecom stuff. You know, we're talking here. We have at last we've moved away from wireless LAN, which really is classical IP. Is an IT network. It's a business network. We've got some servers, we've got some printers, and we've got some workers. And we've moved away from that, and we're now going to vastly broader, wide area networks. And that's what we looked at. But when we looked at this, can you remember when I first showed you this, there was a little bit of fear and trembling about how many pieces of equipment we'd have to throw.
800?
Yeah, it goes up to around 800 if you put all the little bits and pieces together. And people were looking white-knuckled and scared and that sort of thing. But then when we actually took all this and we went through Clarify and we found out what are the actual pieces of kit we support in the EMEA, we found it wasn't all this, it was actually only these two. And suddenly it still looks pretty scary. I don't know about you, but that's still pretty scary. But when we actually took away what's called the groupings, in the same way that we do mobile computers and scanners, once we started to group together modems and set-top boxes, we found that actually it's getting a bit more manageable. And then, can anyone remember what the last list was on the wall? This one here.
It was any cases which were in Clarify in the last 5 years in EMEA.
Yeah. For what type of cases?
Technical.
Technical. So suddenly, although there's all these, if we take away repairs and warranties where we don't have to ask technical questions, we find we've only got this list. And can anyone remember the significance about the order of the list?
Yeah, about the amount of cases.
Yeah, so suddenly, if we've only got a short period of time, we just learn about the VIP. Then we learn about the BSR, then we learn about the... So we actually focus our understanding rather than try and do the whole world. So we were there. Now, how about this one? What are the three sections over here? What are the sections have we got over here of equipment? If we divide this list further down, so we've got our list over here, and we're dividing it further down. What have we got over here? How does this divide up, lads?
That's the head-end.
Yep, head-end equipment.
The distribution network, and then the end-user
Set-top boxes.
Set-top boxes.
Yeah. Why are there two trays in that centre bit there?
Because it's using coax cables or fiber optic.
Yeah. So we've got the bits that are using fibre, and we've got the bits that are using coax. Okay. So when we came down to here, when we came to the head end, which goes, oh, that's far too complicated. we actually split it up. Do you remember? We have a box, video processing. What's the management? What are the video sources? What's interactivity? And so eventually we got ourselves to the stage where it didn't seem so big, yeah? What were all these little bits of paper floating around the place for, lads? What were these little bits of paper for?
Tricky questions.
Yeah, so on each section, and again in the other room, do you remember, at each place, we had what are the key questions about this? What are the key questions about that? All the way round. So it wasn't just abstract. So do you feel comfortable, lads, about what's going on? Not sure. But the last bit, let's just do the last bit of the room, because we're rushing out of time, but let's just go over here. And now we find that, just like any new world, what separates those that look good from those that don't is the people who know the acronyms. Yeah? If you know nothing but the acronyms in life, you will go far. So we've got here all the acronyms you could possibly need. But then, to actually bring this all together, the main thing was, what are the standards and protocols? What are the things that we've got in common we're all doing? And what we found out was that actually TCP/IP, which we use in our IT networks, is still used in that network there. Suddenly, lots of the stuff that we're used to. Now, what's the difference between wired networks in terms of standards and wireless? What's the different standard you use when you're doing wireless compared to wired?
802.11, the wireless,
Yep.
and 802.3, the network.
Exactly. And if we swap 802.3 to 802.11, what do we have to swap to do cable networks? Can you remember the standard?
Doses.
Doses. So just in the same way we swapped 802.11 for Symbol did that, you now do that doses throughout there. And we started to feel cool. We started to feel comfortable. You're? Sorry, you're. A little bit of check there. I only know a little check. And he sells beer. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, man. Okay, so we're nearly there. And the final thing we learned that was actually that brought that network and this network together was. Do you remember this? Remember this? D to A to D, de-encryptor, encryptor, encoder, decoder. And all that happened was there's a series of boxes that process the signals, and at the other end there's the opposite boxes that unprocess the signal. Do you remember we did that? And in between, when it goes fibre to coax, we just use the bottom three. Just like you do with switches where you don't use the higher protocols, in the video world you don't use all the encoding when you're swapping between different sorts of mediums, and that's what we learned. Cool? And that's what we learned in general terms in this room. So now everybody, we're going to just start our game show, Mike. You're just in time for the game show. So I do need an attractive scorer at this point. So if I could get you to get a pen.
I don't know about the attractive bit, I feel that's good.
And if you'd like to put 2 columns on that, and we're going to have a Spanish side and we're going to have a German side. And Martina's going to introduce the game and the people to you.
Hang on.